My name is Chloe. I am 35 years old and somehow still healing from wounds my family inflicted. As a successful software developer, I escaped their toxicity, but I maintained occasional contact hoping things would change. When my family ditched me on Thanksgiving, they had no idea I was the one who paid for the entire $35,000 luxury vacation they were so excitedly bragging about. While they toasted to their success without me, I quietly canceled everything, letting their grand plans collapse the exact same way they abandoned me. The next morning, my phone had 70 missed calls. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family members who constantly underestimated your worth. Growing up in the affluent suburbs of Atlanta meant privilege to outsiders. But inside our sprawling colonial home, emotional coldness permeated every corner. Our four-bedroom house, with its manicured lawn and grand entrance, was a fortress of expectations I could never quite meet. My childhood bedroom became my sanctuary, a prison where I tried to figure out why I was never good enough. From elementary school through high school, I maintained straight A's, joined honor societies, and did everything humanly possible to earn the approval of my mother Brenda and my father Derek. But no matter what I achieved, all their praise and affection were reserved for my younger sister Sierra. Sierra was the golden child, the one who married Trey, a man who called himself a crypto investor and a startup advisor. They lived a life of smoke and mirrors, a flashy facade that my parents absolutely worshipped. That toxic dynamic brings me to last Thanksgiving, the day that broke whatever fragile bond we had left. The invitation had been clear. Dinner was at 4 in the afternoon at my parents' house. My only assignment was to bring our late grandmother's baked macaroni and cheese. This was not just a side dish. In our family, Big Mama's recipe was sacred, a labor of love that required 6 different cheeses, a precise baking time, and an hour of careful preparation. I had spent my entire Thanksgiving morning grating cheese by hand, ensuring the top had that perfect golden brown crust. I carefully wrapped the heavy glass baking dish in thick towels to keep it piping hot and secured it in the passenger seat of my car. The drive from my quiet neighborhood to my parents' sprawling estate took 2 hours due to the holiday traffic. I spent the entire drive mentally preparing myself for the usual passive-aggressive comments. I reminded myself to smile to keep the peace and to just enjoy the holiday. But as I turned onto their long, familiar street, a heavy knot formed in my stomach. I pulled into the wide driveway and put the car in park. Something was wrong. The driveway, which should have been packed with cars belonging to Sierra, Trey, and my parents, was completely empty. The house was pitch black. No porch light, no warm glow from the dining room windows, no sign of life whatsoever. For a moment, panic set in. I thought there might have been a medical emergency. I reached for my phone in the center console, ready to dial my mother. That is when I saw the notification. It was a message in our family group chat sent an hour ago while I was navigating highway traffic. I opened the message. It was from my mother. The text read, "Change of plans. Trey needed to impress some VIP investors who flew into town at the last minute, so we took them out to La Cinque. It is super exclusive and there are no extra seats at the table anyway. Grab something from the fridge at the house. Love you." Attached to the message was a photograph. There was my mother, my father Sierra and Trey all dressed in designer clothes raising expensive glasses of champagne. Sitting across from them were 2 older men in tailored suits, the supposed investors. They looked incredibly happy. They looked like a complete family, a family that did not include me. I sat in the cold silence of my car, the smell of warm baked cheese filling the cabin, and stared at the photo. They had known I was driving 2 hours. They had known I spent my morning cooking the one dish they demanded I bring. Yet they casually redirected their entire Thanksgiving to cater to Trey's desperate need to flex his fake wealth, and they did not even have the decency to call me. Telling me to grab something from the fridge was not just an afterthought, it was a calculated insult. It was their way of reminding me of my place. I was the reliable, invisible workhorse, while Sierra and Trey were the stars of the show. A profound, chilling calmness washed over me. I did not cry. I did not text back a long emotional paragraph about how hurt I was. I simply put my phone down, shifted the car into reverse, and backed out of the driveway. I was not going back to my quiet house to eat leftovers. I was going to Le Cinq. Le Cinq is known as the most exclusive pretentious dining establishment in Atlanta. Getting a reservation on a regular Tuesday requires a minor miracle, let alone on Thanksgiving evening. The restaurant is located in the heart of Buckhead, a monument to wealth and status. I drove the 30 minutes to the restaurant, handed my keys to the valet, and stepped out into the crisp evening air. I was wearing a simple, comfortable cashmere sweater and dark jeans, an outfit perfect for a cozy family dinner at home, but starkly out of place among the evening gowns and tuxedo jackets stepping out of luxury vehicles. I walked through the heavy glass doors of the restaurant. The air inside smelled of white truffles and expensive perfume. The host, a tall man with a severe expression, immediately stepped into my path, looking me up and down with clear disdain. I did not give him a chance to speak. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "My family is in the VIP section, the Derek and Brenda party. I am just here to deliver a message." My tone left no room for argument. He hesitated, then stepped aside, pointing toward the raised velvet-roped section at the back of the dining room. I walked slowly across the imported marble floors. The low hum of wealthy patrons clinking crystal glasses faded into the background. I kept my eyes focused on the back corner. There they were. They were seated in a plush leather booth beneath a massive crystal chandelier. Trey was leaning forward, gesturing grandly with his hands, no doubt spinning some wild lie about his imaginary crypto portfolio. My mother was laughing, leaning in to impress the two wealthy investors. Sierra was busy posing for a selfie, ensuring her designer jewelry caught the light perfectly. I stopped a few feet away from the velvet rope. I just stood there watching the performance. It took less than 30 seconds for the illusion to break. Sierra lowered her phone to check her photo, and her eyes caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. She froze. Her perfectly practiced smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of absolute horror. She quickly slammed her phone face down on the table, leaned over to whisper frantically to Trey, and then stood up, smoothing down her silk dress. Sierra quickly excused herself from the table with a fake musical laugh, pretending she needed the restroom. She practically sprinted toward me, her heels clicking aggressively against the marble floor. Before I could say a word, she grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging into my cashmere sweater. She yanked me behind a large decorative pillar out of sight of the investors. "What are you doing here looking like a catering staff member?" Sierra hissed, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. Her eyes darted around frantically to make sure none of the affluent diners were paying attention to us. I looked down at her hand gripping my arm and then back up to her face. I did not flinch. Trey is literally minutes away from closing a $2 million seed round. Sierra continued speaking in rapid, breathless whispers. "These men flew in from New York. We are selling them on the image of a highly successful unified family business. You showing up uninvited in those tragic jeans ruins the entire aesthetic. We told them you were overseas on a charity mission. You need to leave right now before you embarrass us and ruin my husband's future." I stared at my sister. The sheer audacity of her words hung in the air between us. She had just admitted that my absence was not a mistake, nor was it due to a lack of seating. My absence was a written part of their script. They had actively lied to these men about where I was because the reality of an independent, successful software developer sister did not fit Trey's narrative of being the sole breadwinner and business genius of the family. I slowly reached up and peeled her fingers off my arm one by one. "I am not here to eat your food, Sierra," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I am here because Mom told me to grab something from the fridge and I just wanted to drop off Big Mama's mac and cheese. Oh wait, I left it in the car. My mistake." Sierra crossed her arms, sneering at me. "You are so bitter, Chloe. Just because you chose to live your little quiet, boring life does not mean you get to drag us down. Trey is building an empire. Go home. We will call you tomorrow." Before I could respond to her delusional speech, I heard heavy footsteps approaching from behind the pillar. My parents had noticed the commotion. My father Derek and my mother Brenda stepped into the hallway, their faces pulled tight with anxiety. They looked from Sierra to me, and the disappointment in my mother's eyes was so thick you could cut it with a knife. This was the moment of truth. This was the moment they could have apologized, could have asked the staff to pull up a chair, could have acted like actual parents. Instead, my mother reached into her designer handbag, pulled out her wallet, and prepared to deliver the final insult that would change our family forever. My mother stepped out from behind the decorative pillar, her designer heels sinking slightly into the thick carpet of the restaurant hallway. My father followed closely behind her, his jaw tightly clenched. He had that familiar look of deep annoyance, the exact expression he wore whenever I was deemed an inconvenience to his perfectly curated life. Neither of them looked at me with an ounce of warmth or apology. There was no realization that they had abandoned their eldest daughter on a major holiday. Instead, they looked at me like a problem that needed to be swiftly swept under the rug. My mother reached out and grabbed my elbow, pulling me even further down the dimly lit corridor, away from the glittering chandeliers and the VIP booth where her precious son-in-law was busy lying to men with real money. She leaned in close. The scent of her expensive floral perfume was suffocating. "Chloe, what on earth are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice vibrating with a frantic energy. "We specifically told you there was no room at the table. Do you have any idea how important this dinner is to your sister and Trey? You cannot just show up uninvited looking like you just rolled out of bed." I looked down at my cashmere sweater. It cost more than my mother's entire outfit, but because it did not feature a massive flashy designer logo, it was invisible to her. "I had spent hours cooking for them," I said, keeping my voice deliberately flat. "I was told to grab something from the fridge. I thought I would bring the food here so you would not starve while playing pretend." My father sighed heavily, rolling his eyes as if I were a petulant teenager throwing a tantrum. "Stop being so dramatic, Chloe," he muttered, checking his gold watch. "Trey is pitching a revolutionary tech integration platform. These investors are talking about a $2 million seed round. This could elevate the entire family. You need to be a team player for once in your life." A team player. That was always their favorite phrase when they needed me to sacrifice my time, my money, or my dignity for Sierra's benefit. Before I could respond, my mother opened her leather clutch. She quickly fished around inside, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and aggressively shoved it into my hand. "Here," she said, avoiding my eyes. "Go buy yourself a nice dinner somewhere else. Maybe that steakhouse down the street, or grab some takeout. Just go home. Your sister has an image to maintain tonight and we cannot afford any distractions. We are so close to securing this deal." I stared at the green paper resting in my palm. $100. That was my exact value to them. A bribe to make the ugly, embarrassing daughter disappear so the golden child could continue her charade. The sheer audacity was almost breathtaking. But my mother was not finished. She quickly snapped her clutch shut and lowered her voice even further, adopting a tone of demanding urgency. "And since you are here, there is something else," she said, her eyes darting back toward the dining room to ensure the investors were not watching. "Trey told the investors that we are flying them down to our private villa in St. Bart's next month to sign the final partnership paperwork." I raised an eyebrow, feeling a cold knot of disbelief tightening in my chest. "Your private villa," I repeated slowly. "Keep your voice down," my father snapped, stepping closer to block me from view. "Yes, our villa. It shows them that Trey comes from wealth, that he is established and trustworthy. People with money only trust other people with money, Chloe. It is just business optics." My mother nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. So I need you to forward me the first-class boarding passes and the villa confirmation codes tonight, as soon as you get home." Sierra already posted a teaser about the island takeover on her social media, and the investors' wives are already asking for the itinerary so they can plan their resort wear. Do not forget to send the emails. If Trey cannot produce those confirmation codes by tomorrow morning, he is going to look like a fraud. The absolute delusion radiating from them was staggering. 3 weeks ago, my mother had come to my office weeping crocodile tears, begging me to book a luxury family vacation for Christmas. She claimed Trey's business was struggling due to market conditions and Sierra was deeply depressed. She pleaded with me to use my corporate connections to secure a luxury villa and flights, promising it would be a purely private family retreat to help them heal and bond. I had spent $35,000 of my own money, booking a lavish beachfront property, private chefs, and first-class flights for the entire family. I did it because despite everything, a stupid, naive part of me still wanted to buy my way into their affection. Now I was learning the truth. There was no family bonding. There was no depression. My $35,000 gift was merely a prop for Trey's elaborate scam. They were using my hard-earned wealth to fund his fake millionaire lifestyle, and they had the nerve to kick me out of their Thanksgiving dinner while demanding the receipts for the vacation I paid for. The silence stretched between us. My mother tapped her foot impatiently. Well, she demanded, "Do you understand? We need those codes tonight." I looked at my mother. I looked at my father. I looked past them, catching a glimpse of Sierra giggling at the VIP table, sipping champagne paid for by someone else. For 35 years, I had bent over backwards trying to prove my worth to these people. I had accepted their scraps, their criticism, their blatant favoritism. But standing in the hallway of that pretentious restaurant holding their pathetic $100 bribe, the invisible chains finally snapped. I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not launch into a passionate monologue about how unfairly I was being treated. Anger requires passion, and at that exact moment I felt absolutely nothing for them. I slowly opened my hand. The crisp $100 bill fluttered through the air, catching the dim light before landing softly on the polished marble floor between my mother's designer heels. My mother gasped, looking down at the money as if I had just committed a violent crime. "What is wrong with you?" she whispered fiercely. "Pick that up." I met her gaze with a smile so cold it could have frozen water. "Enjoy your dinner," I said. Without another word, I turned on my heel and walked away. I heard my father mutter something angry under his breath, but neither of them followed me. They were too terrified of making a scene in front of the people who truly mattered to them. I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the restaurant and stepped out into the cool November night air. The valet rushed forward to open the door of my sleek black Porsche Panamera. I slid into the driver's seat, the soft leather interior wrapping around me like a shield. I did not start the engine immediately. I sat in the quiet luxury of my car, staring at the glowing neon sign of the restaurant. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm. The desperate approval-seeking daughter inside me was dead. I reached for my phone and connected it to the car's Bluetooth system. I tapped the screen and dialed my executive assistant, Vanessa. It was late on Thanksgiving, but I paid her incredibly well for emergencies precisely like this one. She picked up on the second ring. "Good evening, Chloe. Happy Thanksgiving. Is everything all right?" "Happy Thanksgiving, Vanessa," I replied, my voice completely steady. "I need you to do something for me right now. Log into the corporate travel portal." I heard the sound of a laptop opening on her end. "I am in. What do you need?" "Pull up the St. Bart's reservation under my name. The one for the entire family next month. The flights, the beachfront villa, the private chef, the yacht charter. Everything." "I have it right here," she said. "Cancel it," I instructed. There was a brief pause on the line. "All of it?" she asked, just to be sure. "Yes," I said firmly. "Cancel the entire $35,000 package. I do not care about the cancellation fees. Just wipe it completely out of the system." "Done," Vanessa said smoothly, the sound of keys clacking echoing through the car's speakers. "The flights have been voided, and the villa management company has confirmed the cancellation. Where would you like the refund routed?" "Refund it directly to my black card," I replied. "And Vanessa, make sure the booking reference numbers are completely deactivated. If anyone tries to look up those confirmation codes, I want the system to show that the reservation does not exist. It is completely scrubbed from the airline and the resort database, Chloe. Anything else?" "No, that will be all. Enjoy the rest of your holiday." I ended the call and tossed my phone onto the passenger seat. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the restaurant. When I booked that St. Bart's trip, my mother had provided a list of ridiculous demands. Sierra needed the master suite with the ocean view. Trey required high-speed internet for his supposed crypto trading. My father wanted a specific brand of aged scotch stocked in the pantry. I had accommodated every single request, paying premium upcharges without a second thought. Now I thought about all those carefully made arrangements dissolving into the digital void. The master suite was gone. The scotch was gone. The private flights were gone. As I merged onto the highway, a profound sense of liberation washed over me. For the first time in my life, I was no longer playing their twisted game. Trey wanted to pretend he was a wealthy mastermind. Sierra wanted to flaunt a life of luxury she did not earn. My parents wanted to enable their delusions at my expense. Let them. They wanted to build a house of cards using my money as the foundation. I had just quietly pulled the foundation out from under them. And the best part was, they had absolutely no idea. They were still sitting in that restaurant chewing on overpriced steak, dreaming of Caribbean beaches and $2 million investments, completely oblivious to the fact that their entire fake reality had just evaporated into thin air. I arrived back at my quiet, peaceful house, leaving the cold mac and cheese on the passenger seat. I walked through my front door, locked it behind me, and poured myself a tall glass of wine. The war had officially begun, and they had already lost. As I sat on my velvet sofa, the rich red wine warming my chest, my mind drifted back to exactly 1 week earlier. The memory of my mother standing in my sleek glass-walled office at my PR firm was suddenly so clear it made my blood boil. She had barged in unannounced, bypassing my receptionist with the sheer force of her entitlement. She was wearing her Sunday best on a random Tuesday, clutching a designer handbag that I knew for a fact Trey had bought her. At the time, I did not know it was bought with borrowed money. I just knew she was there to demand something. She had sat down in the leather chair across from my desk, pulled out a tissue, and immediately started her performance. She told me Trey was on the verge of the biggest deal of his life. He had spent the last 2 years rebranding himself as a cryptocurrency visionary and a startup advisor. According to my mother, he was a genius whose liquidity was just temporarily tied up in the blockchain. The truth, which I would only discover later, was that Trey was entirely broke. His crypto portfolio was practically non-existent, wiped out in a market crash he was too arrogant to foresee. But to keep up his image as a successful entrepreneur, he had to keep spending. "Chloe, you have to help your brother-in-law." My mother had pleaded, dabbing at eyes that were completely dry. "These investors from New York are ready to inject $2 million into his new tech platform. But they need to see that he is already successful. People with money only invest in people who already have money." He told them he is flying them to his private villa in St. Bart's to sign the paperwork. It is the ultimate power move to secure the bag. I had stared at her, genuinely baffled by the sheer scale of the lie. "So you want me to pay $35,000 to rent a villa and book first-class flights just so Trey can pretend he owns it?" I asked. Her face hardened instantly. The fake tears vanished, replaced by the bitter, self-righteous glare I had grown up fearing. "You have more money than you know what to do with," she hissed, gesturing sharply around my beautifully decorated office. "And you owe this family, Chloe. Do not forget where you came from. You abandoned our church community. You walked away from the people who raised you to build this secular PR firm in the city. We prayed for your success. We gave you the spiritual foundation to achieve all of this. Now your sister's husband is trying to build generational wealth, and you are sitting here hoarding your cash like a selfish outsider." The guilt trip was heavily calculated. In our family, abandoning the church was treated like treason. She knew exactly which buttons to push to make me feel isolated and unworthy. She painted a picture of Sierra sinking into a deep depression because of their financial stress, claiming this trip would be a healing family retreat once the investors left. I was so exhausted by the constant feeling of being the family disappointment that I caved. I pulled out my black card and paid for the entire illusion, desperately hoping it would finally earn me a seat at their table. Taking another sip of my wine, I realized how pathetic that sounded now. I had paid for my own exclusion. but as the alcohol settled my nerves, I felt an incredible sense of peace. When I woke up the next morning, it was Black Friday. The sun was streaming through my bedroom windows. For the first time in years, I did not wake up with a heavy chest or a sense of impending dread regarding my family. I felt light. I stretched, grabbed my phone from the nightstand, and saw the screen lit up with dozens of notifications. The group chat was incredibly active. I opened the messages and was immediately assaulted by a barrage of photos. Sierra and my mother were at Phipps Plaza, the most luxurious shopping mall in Atlanta. The first photo showed Sierra standing outside the Prada boutique holding 3 massive shopping bags with a smug smile on her face. The next photo was of my mother trying on a diamond tennis bracelet at a high-end jeweler. The texts accompanying the photos were sickeningly arrogant. "God is so good," Sierra wrote. "Trey's black card just cleared for my new holiday wardrobe. Preparing for island life. The investors' wives are going to be so jealous when they see these fits." I stared at the messages, shaking my head in pure disbelief. I knew the reality behind Trey's mysterious black card. It was not funded by brilliant crypto investments or venture capital. It was funded by high-interest predatory loans. Trey was taking out massive cash advances just to maintain the illusion of extreme wealth, digging a financial grave so deep it would eventually swallow them all. And my sister and mother were happily shoveling the dirt, blinded by designer labels and the desperate need to look rich on social media. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. It was a direct message from Sierra. The tone was completely different from her public bragging in the group chat. It was sharp, demanding, and utterly devoid of the fake sweetness she used when she wanted something. "Chloe, stop ignoring me," the text read. "The investors' wives just texted me. They are going shopping for resort wear today, and they want to see the exact St. Bart's itinerary so they know what the dress code is for the private chef dinners. I need you to send the booking reference codes and the villa confirmation right now. Do not make me ask you again." I read the text twice. The sheer audacity of her demand was almost comical. Less than 12 hours ago, she had physically grabbed me in a restaurant, insulted my appearance, and told me to leave before I ruined her aesthetic. Now she was barking orders at me, demanding the receipts for a $35,000 trip I had paid for so she could continue playing the role of a billionaire's wife. She truly believed I was that weak. She believed I would simply swallow my pride, absorb the humiliation of Thanksgiving night, and hand over the confirmation numbers like a dutiful, obedient servant. She thought the power dynamic in our relationship would never change. She thought she was untouchable. I tossed my blankets aside and swung my legs out of bed. I walked into my kitchen, the cool hardwood floor grounding me, and started brewing a fresh pot of coffee. My mind was racing, but it was a calculated, strategic kind of racing. I was not going to argue with her. I was not going to send a long, angry text explaining that the trip was canceled. That would give her the opportunity to scramble to make excuses to the investors, to somehow twist the narrative and make me the villain. No, I was going to let her dig the hole deeper. I was going to give her exactly what she needed to fully commit to the lie, ensuring that when the truth finally caught up with her, the fall would be spectacular and incredibly public. I poured my coffee, carried the steaming mug into my home office, and booted up my laptop. The morning sunlight caught the framed degrees and awards on my wall, a quiet reminder of everything I had built with my own 2 hands, without a single cent or word of encouragement from the people currently maxing out credit cards at Phipps Plaza. I opened my email and found the original booking confirmation from the airline and the luxury villa management company. The documents were detailed, featuring the names of every family member, the flight times, the baggage allowances, and the lavish descriptions of the beachfront property. I downloaded the documents and opened them in a PDF editing software. It was time to give my sister exactly what she asked for. I stared at the screen of my laptop, the bright white light reflecting in the quiet stillness of my home office. The original PDF from the luxury travel agency was a masterpiece of high-end formatting. It featured crisp logos, elegant typography, and all the glittering details of a $35,000 Caribbean getaway. There were the Delta first-class flight itineraries for 6 people. There was the confirmation for the beachfront villa in St. Bart's, complete with an itinerary for a private chef and a chartered sunset yacht cruise. It was everything my sister needed to prove her husband was a titan of industry. I opened the document in my editing software and got to work. My hands were perfectly steady. I was not operating out of rage anymore. This was purely clinical. I selected the digital eraser tool and carefully dragged it over the actual booking reference numbers, replacing the alphanumeric codes with completely random strings of letters and numbers. Next, I moved down to the flight details. I kept the passenger names, the flight times, and the terminal information completely intact, but I meticulously wiped out the scannable barcodes and the ticket numbers. I scrolled down to the villa reservation. I left the name of the property prominently displayed, knowing Sierra would want to Google it and post screenshots of the infinity pool. I left the dates. I even left the final price tag visible at the bottom of the page because I knew the sight of that $35,000 total would send her ego into the stratosphere. She needed that number to validate her entire existence. But just like the flights, I erased the actual reservation code and the contact information for the property manager. When I was finished, I exported the file. It looked entirely legitimate to the untrained eye. It had all the flashy buzzwords and luxury branding required for a social media flex. But functionally, it was a completely useless piece of digital paper. It was a map to a destination that no longer existed. I attached the modified PDF to a text message. I did not include a greeting. I did not ask about her shopping trip. I simply typed, "Here's the itinerary for the investors. Tell Trey to make sure everyone is at the international terminal by 6 in the morning." I hit send, placed my phone on my desk, and walked into my kitchen to pour a second cup of coffee. I knew my sister better than she knew herself. I knew she would not double-check the confirmation numbers. She would not log into the airline portal to verify the seats. Her brain did not work that way. Sierra operated entirely on surface-level aesthetics. If something looked expensive and could be weaponized to make other women jealous, she accepted it as absolute truth. I anticipated a swift reaction, but even I underestimated her desperation. Exactly 3 minutes after I sent the text, my phone screen lit up with an Instagram notification. Sierra is now live. I picked up my phone, took a slow sip of my dark roast coffee, and tapped the notification. The screen transitioned to Sierra's live broadcast. She was sitting in the passenger seat of Trey's leased Mercedes, the interior ambient lighting glowing behind her. She had a ring light clipped to her phone, illuminating her flawless makeup and the massive, gaudy designer sunglasses pushed up into her hair. The viewer count was climbing rapidly, already passing 2,000 of her 50,000 followers. "Good morning, my beautiful people," Sierra cooed into the camera, using her signature influencer voice, a syrupy, sweet tone she never used in real life. "Happy Black Friday. I hope everyone is out there getting those deals, but honestly, we are just exhausted. Trey has been working so hard this week, closing deals and securing the bag for our family." She paused, checking her reflection in the screen and aggressively adjusting the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist. The comments were scrolling rapidly. Her followers were eating it up, leaving heart emojis and fire symbols. "I just had to jump on here and brag on my husband for a second," she continued, her voice dripping with fake humility. "God is just so good. When you support a visionary Black man, the blessings overflow. Trey just finalized the travel arrangements for his investors and you guys. He is flying the entire family and his business partners down to a private villa in St. Bart's next month." She reached out of frame, grabbed her iPad, and held it up to the camera. On the screen was the exact PDF I had just doctored. She had zoomed in perfectly to highlight the first-class Delta logo and the name of the exclusive resort. "We are doing a complete island takeover," she bragged, tapping her perfectly manicured fingernail against the screen. "Private chefs, yacht days, the whole 9 yards. The investors' wives were just texting me asking what the vibe is going to be, and I told them to pack their best resort wear because we are not holding back. This is what generational wealth looks like, you all. This is what happens when you stay blessed, highly favored, and focused on your goals." I watched her hold up the fake document, her eyes wide with manic excitement. She was high on the validation of thousands of strangers. She was so deeply invested in the lie that it had become her absolute reality. She spent the next 5 minutes giving a detailed, completely fabricated tour of the villa she had never stepped foot in, describing the ocean views and the thread count of the sheets, based entirely on the brochure pictures she had memorized. She even took a moment to address her haters. "You know there are always going to be jealous people out there," she said, her smile turning slightly sharp, a clear and pointed reference to me. "People who want to see you fail. People who cannot handle your elevation. But you just have to pray for them and leave them behind while you board your first-class flight." I felt a genuine burst of laughter bubble up in my chest. It was not an angry laugh. It was the laugh of someone watching a tragedy unfold from a very safe distance. She was lecturing her audience about jealous people, completely oblivious to the fact that the golden ticket she was holding up to the world was provided by the very sister she had banished from Thanksgiving dinner. She was building her entire kingdom on a foundation of sand, and I had just controlled the tide. I watched the live stream for another minute, securing every detail in my memory before swiping out of the application. The trap was not just set. The prey had gleefully walked inside, locked the door, and swallowed the key on live television. I set my empty coffee mug in the sink and walked down the hall to my bedroom. I pulled my sleek silver Rimowa suitcase from the closet and laid it open on my bed. My family was not the only one with travel plans. I had spent the last 2 years pouring every ounce of my energy into building my public relations firm. I had managed crisis campaigns for politicians, launched products for major tech companies, and practically lived in boardrooms. I was exhausted. And after the blatant disrespect of the night before, I decided I was not spending the rest of the holiday season waiting around in Atlanta for the inevitable fallout. I packed quickly and efficiently: linen trousers, silk blouses, high-end swimwear, and a stack of books I had been meaning to read for months. I zipped the suitcase shut, the sound loud and final in the quiet space of my home. I was not going to St. Bart's. I had booked myself a secluded private overwater bungalow in the Maldives. A 20-hour flight to the absolute middle of nowhere, surrounded by crystal-clear water where nobody knew my name, and more importantly, nobody knew my family. I carried my luggage to the front door and requested a premium car service. While I waited, I walked through my house one last time, making sure the security system was armed and the lights were set to their automated timers. I paused by the kitchen island, looking at the Tupperware container holding the leftover baked macaroni and cheese. I grabbed it, walked out to the garage, and threw it directly into the trash can. I was done serving them. The black SUV pulled up to my driveway right on schedule. The driver loaded my bag and I climbed into the spacious back seat. We merged onto the highway heading south toward Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. The morning traffic was light. As we drove, my phone buzzed incessantly in my purse. The family group chat was going crazy. My mother was sending heart emojis in response to Sierra's live stream. My father was sending links to articles about cryptocurrency, praising Trey for his financial genius. I pulled the phone from my bag. I opened the settings menu, navigated to the cellular data options, and paused. For years, I had kept my phone on loud, terrified of missing a crisis, conditioned to be available whenever they needed money advice or a scapegoat. The anxiety of being unreachable had always kept me tethered to their toxic dynamic. But sitting in the back of that car, looking out at the Atlanta skyline fading in the distance, the tether finally snapped. I pressed the power button on the side of the device. The screen prompted me to confirm. Slide to power off. I swiped my thumb across the glass. The screen faded to black, and a profound, heavy silence filled the car. I dropped the lifeless piece of metal back into my purse, leaned my head against the cool leather headrest, and closed my eyes. In exactly 3 weeks, Trey, Sierra, my parents, and the 2 wealthy investors would arrive at the most chaotic airport in the country, hauling designer luggage and inflated egos. They would walk up to the first-class check-in counter, present my useless piece of paper, and the entire illusion would violently shatter, and I would not be there to catch a single piece of the falling glass. Exactly 3 weeks later, the morning of the highly anticipated flight finally arrived. I was miles away, waking up to the sound of gentle waves lapping against the stilts of my overwater bungalow, completely disconnected from the chaos I had set in motion. But the events that unfolded at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport that morning were later recounted to me with such vivid, agonizing clarity by the investor's legal team and the airport staff that I can picture every single second of their spectacular downfall. At 6 in the morning, the international terminal was a massive, echoing cavern of holiday travelers dragging oversized suitcases and rushing towards security checkpoints. Through the sliding glass doors walked the most arrogant entourage the airport had seen all season. Sierra and Trey led the pack, acting as if there were an invisible red carpet rolling out beneath their feet. Sierra was dressed in a pristine white designer tracksuit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hair perfectly styled, hiding her eyes behind massive dark sunglasses despite the sun not even being up yet. Trey walked beside her wearing a tailored navy blazer and flashing a heavy diamond-encrusted watch that he had undoubtedly purchased on a credit card, charging him 29% interest. Right behind them were my parents, Brenda and Derek. My mother was clutching a brand-new Louis Vuitton carry-on bag, her chin held high as she surveyed the crowded terminal with absolute disgust. Acting like the mere presence of economy-class passengers was a personal insult to her newfound status. My father was loudly discussing the current state of the stock market, pretending to be a seasoned financial expert. Rounding out the group were the two VIP investors, Mr. Sterling and Mr. Vance. These were older, distinguished men who had built actual legitimate wealth over decades. They wore unbranded, high-quality clothing and carried scuffed but expensive leather briefcases. They were already looking at Trey with a mild, unspoken skepticism. Trey had promised them a seamless, ultra-luxurious experience, hyping up his supposed private villa and his unmatched hospitality. This airport arrival was his final test before they officially signed over the $2 million seed round. Trey gestured grandly toward the Delta First Class Sky Priority Lane, bypassing the massive line of regular travelers. "Right this way, gentlemen," Trey announced, his voice booming so that everyone nearby could hear him. "I have our assistant handling the baggage fees, but we will just breeze right through check-in. The lounge has a fantastic breakfast spread waiting for us before we board." Sierra pulled out her latest model iPhone, the screen brightly displaying the fake PDF I had carefully crafted for her. She practically strutted up to the polished mahogany counter of the Sky Priority desk, slapping her passport down with an exaggerated sigh of exhaustion. "Good morning," the Delta ticket agent said. She was a middle-aged woman named Carol with a kind face and a name tag that indicated she had been dealing with entitled passengers for over 15 years. "Where are we flying today?" St. Bart, Sierra replied confidently, pushing her phone across the counter. "We are doing a full island takeover. I have the confirmation right here for the entire party. 6 first-class tickets. Make sure our bags are marked for priority offloading. We have a private car waiting on the tarmac." Carol smiled politely and picked up the scanning device. She aimed the red laser at the barcode on the screen of Sierra's phone. The machine let out a sharp negative beep. Carol frowned slightly. "Let me try that again," she muttered, adjusting the angle of the phone. She squeezed the trigger on the scanner. Another sharp negative beep echoed in the quiet priority lane. Sierra rolled her eyes behind her sunglasses, turning back to smile apologetically at the investors. "You know how this airport technology is," she laughed, her voice dripping with condescension. "Always glitching when you are in a rush." Carol set the scanner down and began typing rapidly on her keyboard. "Do you have the alphanumeric booking reference code?" she asked, looking closely at her screen. "The barcode on this document seems to be invalid." "Of course I do." Sierra snapped, her fake sweetness instantly evaporating. "It is right there at the top of the page. Can you please hurry this up? We have VIP guests waiting and we need to get to the lounge." Carol squinted at the PDF and typed the random string of letters and numbers I had generated into her system. She hit enter. The screen refreshed, showing a bright red error message. She tried searching by Sierra's last name. She tried searching by Trey's last name. Every single search yielded the exact same result: a vast empty void. Carol looked up from her computer. her polite smile completely gone, replaced by a look of deep professional confusion. "I am sorry, ma'am, but this booking reference does not exist in our system." "What do you mean it does not exist?" Trey interjected, stepping up to the counter and puffing out his chest. "Look at the paper. It is a Delta confirmation. We spent $35,000 on this trip. Check again." "I have checked multiple ways, sir," Carol replied calmly, maintaining eye contact. "I searched by the confirmation number, your names, and the flight manifest for the St. Bart's route this morning. There is no reservation under any of these names. In fact, looking at the history of this specific document number, it appears this entire itinerary was canceled and fully refunded 3 weeks ago." The words hit the group like a physical shockwave. My mother gasped, dropping her Louis Vuitton bag onto the floor. My father froze, his mouth hanging open. Mr. Sterling and Mr. Vance exchanged a very sharp, very knowing glance. "Cancelled," Sierra shrieked, her voice echoing off the high ceilings of the terminal, drawing the attention of dozens of travelers in the nearby security lines. "What do you mean cancelled?" "My husband did not cancel anything. He is a millionaire. You are making a mistake. You deleted our tickets." "Ma'am, please lower your voice," Carol said, her tone firming up. "The airline did not delete your tickets. The cancellation was initiated by the cardholder who originally made the purchase. The refund was processed and the seats were immediately resold. The flight to St. Bart's is completely fully booked. There are no seats available." Sierra lost whatever little composure she had left. She slammed both of her hands flat onto the check-in counter, her expensive sunglasses sliding down her nose to reveal eyes wide with panic and rage. "This is unacceptable," she screamed, spittle flying from her lips. "Do you know who my husband is? Do you know who we are flying with today? You are going to find us 6 first-class seats right now, or I am going to make sure you lose your job. I want the manager. Call your manager right now." Trey was visibly sweating. The cool, collected crypto bro persona was melting rapidly under the harsh fluorescent lights of the airport. He turned to the investors, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. "Gentlemen, please, I apologize for this minor administrative hiccup. My assistant must have made a catastrophic error. I will have this sorted out in 5 minutes." The investors did not say a word. They just stood there, their faces completely unreadable, watching Trey squirm. Within 90 seconds, the Delta shift manager arrived at the counter. He was a tall, imposing man in a dark suit who looked completely unbothered by Sierra's ongoing tantrum. He reviewed the screen, listened to Carol's quiet explanation, and then turned to face my sister and brother-in-law. Mr. Sterling stepped forward, his voice low and commanding, cutting through Sierra's hysterical yelling. "Manager, I need to understand exactly what is happening here. Is there a flight or not?" The manager looked at the investor respectfully. "Sir, I can confirm what my agent told you. This reservation was completely canceled 3 weeks ago by the original purchaser. There are no tickets." Trey desperately grabbed the edge of the counter. "Fine," he stammered, his voice cracking slightly. "Fine. The flight is messed up. We will just buy new tickets right now. I will buy the whole plane if I have to. Just get us down to the island. We have a private villa waiting for us. We need to get to the property." The manager looked at Trey with a mixture of pity and severe irritation. He picked up the desk phone. "Sir, while you were waiting, I took the liberty of calling the contact number listed on this PDF for the St. Bart's Villa Management Company, just to see if we could coordinate a later arrival for your party." Trey went completely still. The color drained entirely from his face, leaving him looking like a ghost in a tailored blazer. "I spoke with the property manager." The Delta manager continued, his voice carrying clearly across the quiet priority lane. "He informed me that not only was the reservation for the property canceled 3 weeks ago, along with the flights, but the management company has absolutely no record of anyone named Trey ever booking with them. The original reservation was made under a completely different name. You do not have a villa, sir." A heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the group. The relentless beeping of luggage carts and the murmur of the airport faded into the background. The truth was finally out, completely naked and undeniable under the bright lights of Terminal South. My mother started to cry a high-pitched, panicked wail. My father stared at Trey as if he were looking at a complete stranger. Sierra stood frozen at the counter, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, unable to formulate a single word of defense. The meticulously crafted illusion of their immense wealth, their power, and their superiority had been systematically dismantled in less than 5 minutes by a polite ticket agent and a calm manager. And standing right behind them holding their briefcases, the two men with the $2 million check watched the entire pathetic house of cards collapse straight into the ground. Mr. Sterling took a slow, deliberate step forward. The polished professional demeanor he had maintained since arriving at the airport was completely gone. In its place was the cold, calculating glare of a man who had survived decades in cutthroat corporate boardrooms and knew a con artist when he saw one. He looked at the Delta shift manager, then turned his gaze slowly toward Trey. "So let me make sure I have this absolutely clear," Mr. Sterling said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You brought us to this airport at 6 in the morning, promising a private jet experience and a luxury estate retreat. But the reality is, you do not even have a confirmed seat on a commercial flight. And the villa you claim to own, the one you spent the last 2 weeks bragging about, has no record of your existence." Trey held up both hands, his palms sweating, his eyes darting frantically between Mr. Sterling and Mr. Vance. "Gentlemen, please listen to me," Trey pleaded, his voice cracking into a pathetic whine. "This is a massive misunderstanding. My executive assistant handles all my travel logistics. She must have booked the property under a corporate shell company for tax purposes. And the flights, well, you know how these airline systems glitch. My liquidity is locked up in a high-yield crypto staking pool right now, but I have the capital. I am good for it." Mr. Vance let out a harsh, barking laugh that echoed in the quiet priority lane. "A shell company," Vance repeated, shaking his head in absolute disgust. "Do not insult our intelligence, Trey. We ran a preliminary background check on you last week. We saw the inconsistencies in your portfolio, but you talk a good game, so we decided to give you enough rope to hang yourself. And look at you now, swinging from the rafters." Trey took a step toward them. "I can fix this," he begged. "Just give me 10 minutes. I will secure the tickets. We can still sign the papers today." "Sign what papers?" Mr. Sterling snapped, his voice finally rising in anger. "You are a fraud, Trey. You are a broke, pathetic scammer wearing a leased watch and flying on someone else's dime. You wanted $2 million of our firm's money to build a tech platform, but you cannot even afford a plane ticket to the Caribbean. Did you really think we would hand over seed capital to a man who lies about owning a vacation home to stroke his own ego?" Sierra tried to intervene, her voice shrill and desperate. "Wait, you cannot just leave. My husband is a visionary. This is all my sister's fault. She is trying to sabotage us because she is jealous." Mr. Sterling did not even look at Sierra. He kept his eyes locked on Trey. "The deal is completely dead," Sterling said, his tone final and absolute. "If you or anyone from your imaginary company ever contacts our firm again, our legal team will bury you in litigation so deep you will never see daylight. Have a nice life, Trey. Try not to bounce any checks on your way home." Without another word, Mr. Sterling and Mr. Vance turned around. They gripped their leather briefcases and walked away, disappearing into the sea of travelers, taking Trey's fabricated future with them. Trey stood frozen for an agonizing moment, before panic completely overtook him. He spun back around to face the Delta check encounter. Carol, the ticket agent, and her manager were still standing there, watching the meltdown with professional detachment. "I need 6 tickets to St. Bart's on the next available flight," Trey demanded, slamming his hand on the counter. "First class, business class, I do not care. Put us on the plane." The manager tapped his keyboard. "Sir, as I mentioned, today's flight is completely full. I can route you through Miami, but the only available seats are in the main cabin, and it will not get you to the island until late tonight. The walk-up fare for 6 passengers booking last-minute international travel will be $22,400. "Fine," Trey barked, ignoring the horrified gasps from my parents behind him. He reached into his tailored blazer and pulled out a heavy metal credit card, slamming it onto the counter. "Run it." Carol picked up the card and swiped it through the terminal system. The machine processed for 3 seconds before letting out a loud, obnoxious beep. "Declined. Try it again, Trey commanded, sweat now visibly dripping down his forehead. Carol swiped it again. Same beep. She looked at her screen. It says insufficient funds, sir. The bank is denying the charge. Trey frantically dug his wallet out of his back pocket and pulled out another card. Run this one, he said, his hands shaking so badly he dropped his ID on the floor. Carol swiped the second card. Declined. She looked up, her expression a mix of pity and exasperation. Sir, this card is also declining. It says the account has been restricted. Do you have another form of payment? Behind him, the illusion finally shattered for my parents. My mother, Brenda, pushed past Sierra and grabbed Trey by the shoulders, spinning him around. What do you mean? Declined. My mother shrieked, her voice echoing through the terminal. You told us you were a millionaire. You told us you just cashed out a massive crypto dividend. Why are your cards declining for a miserable $20,000? Trey looked at my mother, his eyes wide and terrified. It is just a bank hold, Brenda, he stammered, backing away from her. The fraud department probably locked it because of the high amount. I just need to call them. You are lying, my father, Derek shouted, stepping forward and pointing a trembling finger at Trey. Those men just called you a fraud. You do not own a villa. You do not have the money. You made Chloe pay for everything, did you not? This entire trip was funded by Chloe, and now she pulled the plug. At the mention of my name, a switch flipped in Sierra's brain. She could not accept that her husband was a broke scammer. She could not accept that her entire life was a lie. So she did what she always did. She redirected all her rage and humiliation toward me. It is Chloe, Sierra screamed, digging her phone out of her designer purse. She hacked our itinerary. She canceled it because she is a bitter, vindictive loser. I am going to destroy her. Sierra dialed my number, pacing furiously back and forth in front of the Delta counter. It went straight to voicemail. She hung up and dialed again. My mother, realizing that her grand holiday was officially ruined and her golden son-in-law was a complete fraud, pulled out her phone and started calling me too. The two of them stood in the middle of Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, surrounded by their useless designer luggage, frantically dialing my number over and over again, leaving unhinged voicemails while Trey continued to argue pointlessly with the Delta manager. Halfway across the world, the sun was just beginning to rise over the Indian Ocean. I was lying in a plush king-sized bed in my overwater bungalow in the Maldives. The gentle sound of the waves rolling under the floorboards was the only noise for miles. I stretched my arms above my head, feeling a deep, profound sense of peace. I threw off the high thread count sheets, put on a silk robe, and walked out onto my private wooden deck. The water was a crystal-clear, impossible shade of turquoise. A cool morning breeze brushed against my face. I sat down on a cushioned lounge chair, poured myself a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice from the breakfast tray the resort staff had delivered, and took a deep breath. It was paradise. I reached into the pocket of my robe and pulled out my phone. It had been powered off for almost 24 hours. I pressed and held the side button. The silver Apple logo appeared on the dark screen. I took a sip of my juice, waiting for the device to boot up and connect to the resort's high-speed wireless network. The moment the connection was established, the phone practically vibrated out of my hand. The notifications flooded the screen in an endless rapid-fire cascade, the little red bubbles on my messaging apps multiplied by the second. 10, 30, 50. I unlocked the screen and opened my call log. There were exactly 70 missed calls. 40 of them were from Sierra. 20 were from my mother. 5 were from tapped on my voicemail application. There were over a dozen new messages, but the most recent one was from my father, Derek. I pressed play and held the phone in front of me on speaker. My father's voice exploded from the speaker, tight with absolute fury and panic. Chloe, pick up the damn phone, he bellowed. You have ruined everything. Do you hear me? You humiliated your sister, you destroyed Trey's business deal, and you left us stranded at the airport like absolute fools. I do not care what your problem is, you are going to fix this immediately. You are going to call the airline, you are going to rebook these tickets, and you are going to wire $50,000 to Trey's account to cover the damages you caused. If you do not fix this right now, do not ever think about showing your face in this family again. The voicemail ended with a sharp click. The silence of the Maldives rushed back in to fill the space. I looked out at the endless expanse of the ocean. My father was demanding that I fix a problem they created, demanding my money to save a man who lied to them and threatening to kick me out of a family that had already abandoned me. I smiled a genuine, joyful smile. I set the phone down on the small wooden table next to my lounge chair. The game was finally over, and they had absolutely no idea how much worse it was about to get for them. The phone screen lit up again, vibrating intensely against the smooth wooden table. Call number 71. The caller ID flashed my mother's name in bold white letters. I let it ring 3 times, enjoying the rhythmic buzzing before I finally reached out and swiped the green accept button. I brought the phone to my ear, but kept it an inch away, anticipating the volume. "Chloe," my mother screamed. Her voice was completely raw, stripped of all its usual polished country club pretension. I could hear the echoing announcements of the airport terminal in the background. "What did you do? What is wrong with you? You canceled the trip. You embarrassed us in front of the investors. You ruined Trey's entire business." I listened to her hyperventilate, taking a slow sip of my freshly squeezed orange juice. "I did not ruin anything, Mother." I replied, my voice as calm as the clear blue ocean stretching out in front of me. "I simply returned my $35,000 to my own bank account. If Trey's massive tech empire relies on my personal money to survive, he does not have a business. He has a charity, and I am no longer donating." "You are a spiteful, jealous wretch," she sobbed hysterically, her voice cracking with desperation. "You could not stand seeing your sister happy. You could not stand seeing a real man taking care of this family. After everything we have done for you, you pull a stunt like this." Before I could even process the absolute delusion of calling Trey a real man, while he was currently standing at a Delta counter with maxed out credit cards, the phone was violently snatched away. My father's voice boomed through the speaker, heavy with rage. "Listen to me very carefully, Chloe." Derek growled desperately, trying to regain his position as the unquestioned patriarch. "You have caused a massive catastrophe today. Mr. Sterling and Mr. Vance just walked out on a $2 million deal because of your childish, vindictive behavior. You have disgraced this family's name in front of very important people." "No, Dad," I corrected him smoothly. "Trey disgraced his own name when he lied about owning a luxury villa he could not afford to rent for a single night." "Shut up and listen to me!" My father barked, his temper completely flaring out of control. "You are going to fix this right now. I am texting you Trey's business routing number. You are going to wire $50,000 into his account to cover the lost investments and the embarrassment you caused. If you do not send that money by noon, you are completely dead to us. Do you hear me? We will disown you. You will lose your family forever." I sat back in my cushioned chair. For 35 years, that exact threat had been the ultimate weapon they held over my head. The fear of being cast out, of being truly alone, had kept me writing checks, swallowing my pride, and accepting their disrespect. But sitting there in the sun, thousands of miles away, I realized they had nothing left to offer me. Their conditional love was a transaction I could no longer afford, and their toxic presence was a weight I was finally ready to drop. "Are you listening to me?" My father yelled into the phone, his breathing heavy. $50,000, Chloe, or you have no family." I took a deep breath of the salty ocean air. "Thanksgiving night, you told me there was no room at your table," I said softly, but with absolute, unbreakable finality. "You wanted a table for family only. Now you have one, in the airport food court. Enjoy your meal." I pulled the phone away from my ear and pressed the red button. The line went dead. I immediately went into my settings and blocked my father's number. Then I blocked my mother's number, then Trey's, and finally Sierra's. The digital wall came down, sealing them out of my life permanently. However, I knew my sister too well to think my silence would be the end of the drama. Sierra was a lifestyle influencer. Her entire existence depended on controlling the narrative, playing the victim, and manipulating her audience. When she lost control in the real world, she always ran to the digital one to seek immediate validation. About an hour later, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa, my executive assistant. The message read, "You might want to check Instagram. Your sister is putting on a masterclass in creative fiction." Attached was a direct link to Sierra's page. I clicked the link. It opened up a recording of an Instagram live that Sierra had broadcasted from what looked like a family restroom at the Atlanta airport. The fluorescent lighting was harsh, and she had deliberately messed up her perfectly styled hair to look distressed and exhausted. The massive designer sunglasses were gone, replaced by wide, tear-filled eyes. She was holding the phone close to her face, sniffing dramatically, employing a very specific type of weaponized victimhood that she had perfected over the years. "Hey guys!" Sierra sniffled into the camera, her voice trembling with manufactured trauma. "I was not going to make this video, but I feel like I have an obligation to speak my truth. My family and I are going through something incredibly traumatic right now, and I just need my community to pray for us." She paused, wiping away a single strategically placed tear from her cheek. The viewer count on the recording showed over 10,000 people had tuned in live. The comments were a rapid stream of concern and support. Messages like "sending prayers" and "stay strong, beautiful" floated up the screen. As many of you know, my husband Trey has been working tirelessly to build his tech company. Sierra continued staring soulfully into the lens. "He is a brilliant, hardworking Black man trying to build generational wealth for our community. He had just secured a massive investment deal. We were supposed to be flying to our property in St. Bart's today to celebrate and sign the final papers." She let out a ragged, theatrical sob, pressing her manicured hand to her chest. "But we never made it on the plane. We got to the airport and found out that everything had been destroyed. And the person who did it was my own sister." I watched, genuinely impressed by her complete detachment from reality. She was not just lying. She was building an alternate universe where she was the persecuted heroine. My older sister Chloe Sierra said dropping my name to her thousands of followers is a very bitter, very lonely woman. She has always been insanely jealous of me and Trey. She cannot stand the fact that I have a loving marriage and a successful husband while she is completely single and miserable. So, out of pure spite, she maliciously hacked into our travel accounts this morning. Sierra leaned closer to the camera, lowering her voice to a dramatic, breathy whisper. "She canceled our flights. She canceled our villa. She completely sabotaged Trey's business deal just to tear down a successful Black man. She humiliated us in front of major investors. I am just so heartbroken. I cannot believe my own blood would betray us like this. Please send positive energy to Trey because his heart is completely broken by this vicious attack." The video ended. I scrolled down to the comment section beneath the saved broadcast. It was an absolute bloodbath. Her followers had mobilized instantly, forming a digital mob ready to burn me at the stake. They were calling me a jealous hater, a traitor to my own people, a bitter spinster who needed to be sued for everything I owned. They fed into the narrative, perfectly praising Sierra for her grace and condemning me for my supposed cruelty. Some of her more aggressive followers had already found the business page for my public relations firm. They were leaving one-star reviews on Google, tagging my corporate clients on Twitter, and demanding that I be investigated for cybercrimes. Sierra had successfully activated her flying monkeys, spinning a web of lies so thick that her audience swallowed it without a single second thought. She knew exactly what she was doing. By framing Trey as a hard-working entrepreneur, targeted by a malicious, jealous sister, she shielded him from any accountability. She never mentioned that the trip was paid for with my credit card. She never mentioned that the villa never belonged to Trey in the first place. She presented a flawlessly edited version of the truth designed specifically to ruin my reputation and elevate her own martyr status. In the past, an attack like this would have sent me into a blind panic. I would have spent hours drafting a long, desperate response, trying to explain myself and beg for understanding from strangers on the internet. I would have called my parents crying, asking them to make her stop. But sitting on my deck in the Maldives, listening to the gentle ocean waves, I felt no panic. I felt a cold, sharp sense of clarity. Sierra thought she had just dealt a fatal blow to my career and my character. She thought she had won the public relations war against a woman who literally ran a high-end public relations firm for a living. I took another sip of my orange juice, the sweet citrus flavor, mingling with the taste of absolute victory. Sierra had just made the biggest mistake of her entire life. By taking this public by naming me and my business, she had given me the legal and social justification to respond without holding back. She had dragged our private family conflict into the public square, and now I was going to finish it there. I picked up my phone, opened my email application, and began typing a message to my lead corporate attorney in Atlanta. The subject line was simple: defamation and full disclosure. It was time to pull the curtain all the way back and let everyone see exactly who the real frauds were. I hit send on the email to my attorney, locked my phone screen, and set it down on the table. Over the next 48 hours, my tropical sanctuary became the command center for a digital war I had never asked for, but was fully prepared to fight. Sierra's tearful, manipulative live stream had acted like a bat signal for every gossip-hungry, self-righteous member of our extended family and the tight-knit church community I had walked away from years ago. My blocked call list was completely effective against my immediate family, but I had forgotten to block the flying monkeys. The text messages and direct messages began pouring in from aunts, second cousins, and people who had not spoken to me since I was a teenager. Aunt Vivian, my mother's older sister and the undisputed matriarch of the church choir, was the first to strike. Her message was a massive, unhinged paragraph accusing me of spiritual warfare and deep betrayal. Chloe. I am absolutely disgusted by your actions, Aunt Vivian wrote, filling the screen with aggressive capital letters. You have allowed the devil to use you to tear down your own flesh and blood. Trey is a hard-working, successful Black man trying to elevate our community, and you let your bitter jealousy destroy his blessings. You are a disgrace to the family name and a poor reflection of the values you were raised with. Repent before God strikes down that little business of yours. Then came my cousin Jamal, a man who still lived in his mother's basement at 35, and frequently asked me for loans he never repaid. You are completely out of pocket for what you did to Trey. Jamal messaged me on Facebook. Black men have it hard enough out here without their own women tearing them down. You need to wire him that money and apologize publicly. Do not forget who supported you before you got rich and stuck up. Next was Sister Beatrice, the head of the church usher board, who decided to leave a scathing comment on my company's professional LinkedIn page. She wrote it is a shame when a woman achieves financial success but loses her moral compass. True success is supporting your family, not destroying your brother-in-law's business out of spite. The sheer hypocrisy of their collective outrage was staggering. These were the exact same people who never once celebrated my business milestones. They never attended my corporate launch parties. They actively criticized my decision to focus on building a career instead of settling down and finding a husband. In their eyes, an unmarried independent woman with her own money was an anomaly that needed to be humbled. Yet the moment a man who wore leased designer clothes and spoke in empty crypto buzzwords shed a single tear, they rallied around him like he was a community leader under attack. They weaponized our cultural solidarity against me. They used the very real struggles of Black entrepreneurs to shield a man who was nothing more than a common con artist. They did not know that Trey was funding his fake empire by draining my parents' retirement accounts and forging signatures. They only knew the perfectly curated aesthetic Sierra fed them on social media. And because I refused to play the quiet, supportive background character in their delusions, I was instantly cast as the ultimate villain. I did not reply to a single message. I did not argue or attempt to defend myself in the comment sections. Silence is a mirror, and I wanted them to see exactly how unhinged they looked. Instead of panicking, I systematically took screenshots of every hateful text, every threatening direct message, and every defamatory public comment. I organized the evidence into a neatly labeled digital folder and forwarded the entire package to my legal team back in Atlanta. Let them type their hateful paragraphs. Every word they sent was just another nail in the coffin I was building for Trey's fraudulent empire. A week later, my solo vacation in the Maldives came to a peaceful end. I boarded my first-class flight back to Atlanta, feeling completely rested, deeply tanned, and absolutely lethal. I was no longer the exhausted daughter seeking basic validation from people who despised me. I was a corporate strategist, stepping onto a battlefield I fully controlled. I went straight from the airport to my public relations firm, located in a towering glass high-rise in Midtown Atlanta. My office was a sanctuary of modern professionalism. It featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, sleek marble floors, and a dedicated team of highly paid experts who respected my leadership. I had just sat down at my massive glass desk organizing my notes for an upcoming client campaign when my intercom buzzed loudly. "Chloe, we have a situation in the lobby," Vanessa said, her usually calm voice laced with tight irritation. "There is a man here demanding to see you immediately. He is being incredibly aggressive, raising his voice and making a scene in front of the junior staff. He says he has urgent legal documents that must be delivered directly into your hands." I did not panic. I simply smoothed the lapels of my tailored blazer and stood up. "Send him in, Vanessa," I replied smoothly. "And please ask our building security team to stand by just in case he forgets how to act in a professional environment." A moment later, the heavy frosted glass doors of my office swung open with unnecessary force. A short, heavily perspiring man in a cheap, ill-fitting gray suit marched into the room. He did not look like a high-powered corporate litigator from a respected firm. He looked like a discount strip mall lawyer who advertised his services on billboards along the highway. He was clutching a thick manila envelope, his chest puffed out in a pathetic display of manufactured authority. "Are you Chloe?" he barked, marching right up to my desk and practically throwing the envelope onto the pristine glass surface. "Consider yourself served." I looked at the wrinkled envelope, then slowly looked up at his sweating face. "I am. And you are currently trespassing in a private corporate office. Who exactly do you represent?" "I represent Trey and his technology enterprise," the man sneered aggressively, adjusting his cheap polyester tie. "My client is taking decisive legal action against you for your malicious interference in his corporate affairs. You thought you could ruin a multi-million-dollar seed round, humiliate him at the airport, and just walk away without consequences. My client has creditors breathing down his neck because of your vindictive little stunt." I calmly picked up the envelope, slid my silver letter opener under the flap, and pulled out the thick stack of documents. The sheer absurdity of the paperwork almost made me laugh out loud right in his face. It was a formal cease and desist letter, accompanied by a lawsuit filed in the local county civil court. The charges listed in bold black ink were tortious interference with prospective economic advantage, defamation of character, and breach of verbal contract. Trey was officially suing me for $2 million, the exact amount of the investment deal he had lost when Mr. Sterling and Mr. Vance walked away at the airport. As I quickly skimmed through the poorly drafted legal jargon and the numerous spelling errors, the reality of Trey's situation became crystal clear. This lawsuit was not about seeking actual justice. It was a desperate, flailing smokescreen meant to distract from his own collapse. Trey was drowning in massive debt. His predatory lenders and maxed-out credit card companies were undoubtedly threatening to collect. By filing this ridiculous high-profile lawsuit against me, he was frantically trying to buy time. He was trying to show his angry creditors and my completely brainwashed family that he was the innocent victim of a malicious attack, and that he would soon have $2 million in settlement money to pay everyone back once he defeated his wealthy sister-in-law. It was the ultimate reckless gamble of a desperate con man backed into a corner. "I am assuming you actually read these documents before you brought them to my office and made a scene in my lobby," I said to the sweaty lawyer, keeping my voice dangerously low and completely steady. "I drafted them myself," he replied smugly, leaning forward and placing his hands on my desk. "We have sworn affidavits from the family members who witnessed your hostile, threatening behavior at the restaurant the night before the flight. We have digital proof that you maliciously canceled the itinerary without authorization. You are looking at absolute financial ruin and public disgrace. My client is willing to be generous and settle out of court today quietly if you wire the full $2 million to his holding account by 5 o'clock. I dropped the ridiculous papers back onto my desk and leaned back in my leather chair. You and your client are severely out of your depth, I said, staring directly into his eyes. You just aggressively walked into the office of a woman who manages crisis communications and legal PR for Fortune 500 companies, and you handed me a fraudulent lawsuit based on a fake business that generates absolutely zero revenue. The lawyer scoffed loudly, crossing his arms over his chest. Save the PR spin for a judge, lady. You have 24 hours to respond to the settlement offer before we take this entire story to the press and destroy your reputation for good. You do not need 24 hours, I replied softly, reaching for my desk phone. Tell Trey my legal counsel will contact you by the end of the business day. Now pick up your briefcase and get out of my office before I have building security forcefully remove you for harassment. The lawyer opened his mouth to argue clearly, wanting to deliver another dramatic threat. But the sight of my two massive, impeccably dressed security guards stepping into the doorway quickly changed his mind. He snatched his briefcase off the chair, turned on his heel, and scurried out of the office, his cheap shoes squeaking loudly against the polished marble floor. I stood alone in my quiet office, staring at the legal documents resting on my desk. Trey had actually done it. He had escalated a petty toxic family dispute into a formal legal battle. He had crossed the final unforgivable line, attempting to use the justice system to extort me and save his own pathetic skin. By filing a public lawsuit, he had officially opened the door for the legal discovery process. Every single financial record, every bank statement, and every property deed was now completely fair game. He thought he was putting me on trial. He did not realize he had just handed me the legal authority to financially strip him bare in front of the entire world. I picked up my phone and dialed my lead corporate attorney. The warning shots were over. It was time to execute the masterstroke. The very next morning, I walked through the heavy mahogany doors of one of the most ruthless corporate litigation firms in the city of Atlanta. I did not hire a discount lawyer from a highway billboard. I hired Elias Thorne. Elias was a senior partner known for dismantling fraudulent corporations and tearing apart opposing counsel with clinical precision. He charged $1,000 an hour, and he was worth every single penny. I bypassed the receptionist, having already been cleared, and walked straight into his expansive corner office overlooking the city. Elias was sitting behind his massive oak desk, reading the paperwork Trey had sent to my office the day before. He did not look up immediately. He just shook his head, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "Good morning, Chloe," Elias said, tossing the cease and desist letter onto his desk like a piece of garbage. "I have to admit I get a lot of ridiculous filings across my desk, but this one belongs in a museum. Your brother-in-law is suing you for $2 million in lost prospective investments based on a verbal agreement that never existed." His lawyer misspelled tortious twice. I sat down in the leather chair opposite him, crossing my legs and resting my designer handbag on the floor. "I know," I replied smoothly. "It is a desperate intimidation tactic. He is drowning in debt, his investors walked out on him, and he needs a scapegoat to show his angry creditors. He thinks a high-profile lawsuit will scare me into quietly settling out of court to protect my public relations firm." Elias leaned back, interlacing his fingers. "Well, the irony here is monumental. By officially filing a lawsuit claiming you caused him financial damages, he has legally opened his own financial history to the discovery process. If he claims a loss of income, he has to prove he had a legitimate business capable of generating that income. We have the right to subpoena every single bank statement, every tax return, and every corporate filing under his name." "He does not have a legitimate business," I stated flatly. "He is a con artist. But we do not need to wait for a subpoena, Elias. I already did the homework." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick, heavy manila folder. I dropped it onto his desk with a satisfying thud. The warning shots were over. I was bringing out the heavy artillery. "What is this?" Elias asked, raising an eyebrow as he reached for the folder. "That is my ultimate secret weapon," I told him, watching his face as he opened the cover. As the owner of a top-tier public relations firm, I have access to some of the best private investigators and forensic accountants in the state. When my mother first came to my office crying about Trey's business struggles, my instincts told me something was wrong. So I had my team run a comprehensive background check on him. I wanted to know exactly where my $35,000 was going. Elias began flipping through the pages, his eyes widening slightly as he processed the documents. Let us start with the St. Bart's property, I instructed, pointing to the first stack of papers. Trey told his investors, his followers, and our entire family that he owned that beachfront luxury villa. He claimed I maliciously canceled his trip. Look at the deed of trust on page 3. Elias scanned the document. This is a legally certified deed of ownership, he murmured. The property is registered under a corporate LLC. Look at the owner of the LLC, I prompted. Elias traced his finger down the page and stopped. A short bark of laughter escaped his lips. The owner is your public relations firm. You own the villa. Exactly. I smiled coldly. I bought it 2 years ago as a corporate retreat for my executive team. It was a fantastic tax write-off. Trey must have snooped through my laptop during a family dinner, found the photos and the location, and decided to use my property as the imaginary crown jewel of his fake crypto empire. I did not cancel his trip. I simply exercised my legal right to remove trespassers from my privately owned real estate. Brilliant, Elias said, shaking his head in sheer amusement. This alone destroys his defamation claim. You cannot defame someone by stating a documented legal fact. What else is in here? Keep reading, I told him, my voice dropping to a serious, icy tone. The next section details his financial history. Elias flipped to the next thick stack of papers. These were the public records my investigators had easily pulled. There were dozens of high-interest personal loans, maxed-out credit cards, and outstanding notices from collection agencies. Trey had zero liquidity. His supposed cryptocurrency fortune was entirely non-existent. But the real bombshell was buried at the very back of the folder. I had saved the worst for last. Look at the secondary mortgages, I said, leaning forward. Elias pulled out a set of banking documents. His brow furrowed as he read the fine print. Your brother-in-law has taken out 2 massive cash advances against a residential property here in Atlanta. The total amount borrowed is over $400,000, but the property is not in his name. It belongs to Derek and Brenda. My parents, I confirmed, feeling a sharp twinge of disgust. He used my parents' home as collateral to fund his fake lifestyle. He bought his leased Mercedes, my mother's designer bags, and Sierra's shopping sprees by secretly draining the equity out of the house my parents spent 30 years paying off. Did your parents authorize this? Elias asked, his lawyer instincts immediately kicking into high gear. I doubt it, I replied. My father is an arrogant man, but he is fiercely protective of his credit score. He would never risk his home for a risky crypto venture. Look at the signatures on the loan agreements. Elias examined the signatures closely, comparing them to a copy of my father's actual signature from a public voting record included in the file. These are blatant forgeries, Elias stated, his voice turning deadly serious. The loop on the D is entirely wrong. Chloe, this is not just civil fraud. This is federal wire fraud and identity theft. If we take this to the authorities, your brother-in-law is looking at significant prison time. I know, I said, feeling no sympathy whatsoever. And we are going to give this entire file to the authorities. But first, we are going to handle the court of public opinion. Legal battles take months, sometimes years. I do not have the patience to let my sister play the victim for another 6 months while my company's reputation takes a hit. I am going to end this today. What is your plan? Elias asked, closing the folder and looking at me with deep respect. I am going to give them exactly what they want. I smiled. A public surrender. I left Elias's office feeling lighter than air. The trap was fully loaded, and it was time to bait the hook. I drove back to my house, sat down at my kitchen island, and pulled out my phone. I unblocked Sierra, my parents, and the extended family members, just long enough to execute my strategy. I opened Instagram, navigated to my company's verified page, as well as my personal account, and typed out a meticulously crafted public statement. The wording had to be absolutely perfect. It had to sound desperate, apologetic, and utterly defeated. The post read, the events of the past few weeks have torn my family apart. I recognize the pain and the financial damage that has been caused regarding the St. Bart's trip and Trey's lost investments. Tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, I will be hosting a live stream on this page to publicly apologize, set the record straight, and take full accountability for my actions. Family is everything, and I want to make things right. Please tune in. I published the post. I tagged Sierra. I tagged Trey's fake business page. I tagged my parents' church group, Aunt Vivian, and every single flying monkey who had sent me a hateful message over the past week. Then, using my firm's marketing budget, I aggressively boosted the post so it would immediately appear at the top of the feed for anyone connected to my sister. The reaction was instantaneous. Within minutes, my phone began lighting up with notifications. The comments flooded in, overwhelmingly smug and victorious. Aunt Vivian wrote, "Praise the Lord, the truth always comes to the light. It is about time you humbled yourself." My cousin Jamal commented, "Better have that checkbook ready tonight." But the most satisfying reaction came from Sierra. She immediately took a screenshot of my announcement and reposted it to her own Instagram story with the caption, "God always vindicates his chosen people." Tune in tonight to watch the truth unfold. Hashtag Justice for Trey. Hashtag blessed. They took the bait entirely. They genuinely believed that their intimidation tactics, the hateful messages, and the ridiculous $2 million lawsuit had broken me. They thought I was terrified of losing my business and was crawling back to beg for their forgiveness on my hands and knees. As the sun began to set over Atlanta, I learned from a mutual acquaintance exactly how my sister and brother-in-law were preparing for the evening. Sierra and Trey had turned my supposed public humiliation into a celebratory event. They had invited my parents' Aunt Vivian and several other vocal church members over to their rented townhouse for a watch party. I could picture the scene perfectly. They were sitting in their living room surrounded by furniture they could not afford. They had undoubtedly hooked their phones up to the massive flat-screen television, waiting eagerly for my face to appear. Trey was probably wearing his fake Rolex, sipping cheap champagne, bragging to my father about how he had successfully strong-armed me into submission and how he would use my incoming settlement money to revive his crypto empire. Sierra was likely sitting right beside him, her phone ready to record my tears so she could use my apology as permanent leverage for the rest of our lives. They were all gathered together, popping bottles and celebrating their ultimate victory over the black sheep of the family. They were expecting a humiliating surrender. They were expecting me to cry, to apologize for being jealous, and to offer them whatever they demanded. Meanwhile, I was in my home office, setting the stage for an entirely different kind of broadcast. I positioned my high-definition camera on its tripod. I adjusted the professional ring light so it cast a bright, flawless glow across my desk. I wore a sharp emerald green blazer that screamed corporate authority. And right in front of me, neatly organized and completely visible to the camera lens, were the thick files of legal documents I had reviewed with Elias. I looked at the digital clock on my computer screen. 7:59. I took a deep, centering breath. I reached forward, my finger hovering over the mouse. "Let the execution begin," I whispered to the empty room. I clicked the button and the red indicator light on the camera blinked to life. "You are now live." I clicked the button and the red indicator light on the camera blinked to life. "You are now live." The viewer count in the top right corner of my screen did not just climb, it skyrocketed. Within the first 30 seconds, over 5,000 people had joined the broadcast. The number kept ticking upward at a dizzying pace. 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. Sierra had done an excellent job of promoting my supposed public apology. Her entire army of followers, our extended family members, the church congregation, and anyone who loved a good internet scandal, had tuned in expecting a spectacular show of submission. The chat box on the side of the screen was a blur of rapid-fire text. People were leaving smug comments demanding that I apologize to Trey, calling me bitter, and telling me to pay the $2 million. I saw Aunt Vivian's username pop up, typing out a long prayer for my humbled soul. I saw Sierra's official verified account pin a comment to the top of the chat that read, "Waiting for the truth." I sat perfectly still for a full minute, letting the audience settle in. I did not look like a woman who had been defeated. I looked like a CEO about to terminate an entire department. I adjusted the lapels of my emerald green blazer, looked directly into the camera lens, and offered a calm, polite smile. What the thousands of viewers did not know, and what my family was about to find out in the most brutal way possible, was that my home office was no longer located in Atlanta. Immediately after my meeting with Elias that morning, I had taken a private charter flight straight to the Caribbean. I reached over and tapped a button on my remote control. The automated blackout blinds behind my desk slowly rolled up, flooding the room with brilliant natural light. The background behind me was instantly revealed. It was not the Atlanta city skyline. It was a stunning, sun-drenched ocean view. Crystal clear turquoise water stretched out to the horizon, framed by pristine white sand and the lush tropical foliage of an exclusive private island. The sound of gentle waves rolling onto the beach was faintly picked up by my microphone. I leaned forward, clasping my hands together on the glass desk. "Hello, everyone," I said, my voice projecting with crystal clear authority. "Thank you all for joining me tonight. I know there have been a lot of rumors circulating over the past few weeks. My sister Sierra recently went live on this very platform to tell you all a tragic story. She told you that I maliciously hacked her accounts, ruined her husband's business deal, and canceled their luxury trip to his private villa out of pure jealousy." I paused, letting the silence hang for a split second. The chat box had suddenly slowed down, the viewers visibly confused by the tropical background behind me. "I am streaming to you live from that exact villa right now," I announced. The chat froze completely. For 5 seconds, not a single comment appeared on the screen. The collective shock of 20,000 people staring at the undeniable visual proof was palpable. I picked up the thick manila folder from my desk and opened it. I pulled out the heavy embossed legal document that Elias and I had reviewed just hours earlier. I held the paper up to the camera, making sure the official government seals and the bold printed text were perfectly in focus. "Trey does not own this property," I stated, my voice slicing through the digital silence like a scalpel. "He never has. My public relations firm bought this estate 2 years ago to serve as a corporate retreat for my executives. The deed of trust, which you are looking at right now, lists my company as the sole owner. I have the legal right to enjoy my property whenever I please." I set the deed down and picked up a stack of printed photographs. I held them up one by one. These were the exact promotional photos Sierra had shown off on her live stream. A few months ago, during a family dinner at my house in Atlanta, Trey asked to use my laptop to check an urgent email, I explained. While he had access to my computer, he went into my private files and downloaded the architectural photos of this property. He stole those photos to scam his investors. He built a completely fake narrative that he was a highly successful cryptocurrency millionaire who owned a Caribbean estate. He used my private property as the ultimate prop in his pathetic confidence game. The comments section exploded. The tide was turning with violent speed. People were tagging Sierra's account, demanding an explanation. The flying monkeys who had been harassing me all week were suddenly backpedaling, typing strings of question marks and shocked emojis. But I was just getting started. I picked up the next document, a certified bank statement showing the $35,000 charge and the subsequent refund. "Now let us talk about the canceled flights." I continued, keeping my eyes locked on the camera lens. Sierra claimed I maliciously hacked into her accounts to sabotage their trip. That is a complete fabrication. 3 weeks ago, my mother came to my office begging me to pay for a family vacation because Trey was allegedly struggling with his mental health. Because I foolishly wanted to support my family, I used my personal black card to book 6 first-class tickets and arrange the logistics for a trip to this very villa. I held the bank statement up to the lens, highlighting my name at the top and the massive $35,000 charge at the bottom. I paid for every single cent of that trip, I said. Not Trey, not Sierra, me. But on Thanksgiving night, when I drove 2 hours to bring food to a family dinner, my parents and my sister informed me that I was not welcome to join them. They had decided to take Trey's VIP investors out to dinner instead, and they told me there was no room at the table for me. My mother handed me $100 bill and told me to go eat somewhere else while simultaneously demanding that I forward the confirmation codes for the vacation I had just purchased for them. I let out a short, cold laugh. I did not hack anyone. I did not steal anything. I simply called my travel agent and authorized a full refund to my own credit card. I did not cancel his trip. I removed trespassers from my property and canceled a gift for ungrateful people. The chat was moving so fast the text was completely unreadable. The public humiliation they had planned for me had spectacularly backfired, catching them completely exposed in front of their entire community. Sierra had built her entire brand on authenticity and luxury. In less than 5 minutes, I had proven that her life was a cheap, stolen illusion funded by the sister she publicly despised. I knew exactly what was happening at their watch party back in Atlanta. I could visualize the absolute chaos unfolding in their rented townhouse. Aunt Vivian and the church members were sitting on the couch staring at the television screen in horrified silence. My father was probably yelling at Trey, demanding to know why the deed to the villa had my company's name on it. Sierra was undoubtedly screaming desperately, trying to turn off the television or frantically typing on her phone to delete her previous posts. They had invited their entire social circle to witness my downfall, and instead I had locked them in a room and forced them to watch their own execution. And speaking of lawsuits, I said, shifting my tone from calm explanation to absolute corporate warfare. Yesterday, Trey sent a discount attorney to my office. He filed a formal civil lawsuit against me claiming $2 million in damages for tortious interference. He claimed that my actions caused his investors to pull their funding. I picked up the cease and desist letter and casually ripped it straight down the middle, tossing the pieces off camera. Trey's investors did not pull their funding because of me, I clarified. They pulled their funding because they realized Trey was a broke scammer who could not afford to fly them to an island he lied about owning. But I actually want to thank Trey for filing that lawsuit. By taking me to court and claiming financial damages, he gave my legal team the absolute right to investigate his financial history. If you claim a business loss, you have to prove you actually have a business. I leaned closer to the camera. The trap was about to snap shut entirely. My sister and my brother-in-law have been living a life of extreme luxury online. Designer clothes, expensive cars, constant shopping sprees. Trey calls himself a crypto visionary. But the truth is, Trey generates zero revenue. He has no investments. He is completely broke. I paused, preparing to drop the final devastating bomb that would destroy everything they had left. The financial reality was far worse than anyone watching could possibly imagine. I reached for the final stack of banking documents, the ones featuring the forged signatures. If you are wondering how they paid for the designer bags and the leased Mercedes, I said softly, the answer is right here. And I suggest my parents pay very close attention to this next part, because you are about to find out exactly how much your golden child has cost you. The live stream viewer count crossed 30,000. The internet was watching, and I was about to show them the real price of fake wealth. The live stream viewer count crossed 30,000. The internet was watching, and I was about to show them the real price of fake wealth. I picked up the stack of banking documents I had received from my legal team. When Trey filed a civil lawsuit against me for $2 million, he made a fatal miscalculation. In the state of Georgia, claiming massive financial damages in a corporate dispute opens up your own financial history to the legal discovery process. Because he decided to involve the court system, these documents are no longer private. They are evidence, and I have the legal right to present my defense. I held the first page up to the camera. It was a summary of Trey's personal bank accounts and his supposed cryptocurrency portfolios. Trey has spent the last 2 years convincing his followers and my family that he is a financial genius. He claims his liquidity is tied up in high-yield blockchain investments. Let us look at the reality. I pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the total balance line. His crypto portfolio is completely empty. It has been empty for over 18 months. He lost his initial investment in a market crash and never recovered. He has absolutely zero corporate revenue. He has no venture capital backing. His entire business is a ghost. But that begs the question, How did Trey afford the leased Mercedes? How did he afford my sister's endless shopping sprees at Phipps Plaza? How did he buy my mother a Louis Vuitton bag? If he is completely broke, where is the money coming from? I set the first document down and picked up the next file. This one was significantly thicker, filled with complex legal jargon and official notary stamps. The money did not come from his brilliance. It came from high-interest predatory loans. And more importantly, it came from the equity of a house he does not even own. I held the document up to the ring light. This is a secondary mortgage agreement. It is a cash advance loan taken out against a residential property. The amount borrowed is over $400,000. But if you look closely at the property address, you will see it is not registered to Trey. The address listed on this loan is my parents' house, the home my father Derek and my mother Brenda spent 30 years paying off. The chat box completely stopped moving for a fraction of a second as the information registered. I could feel the collective shock radiating through the screen. Trey used his own in-laws' home as collateral to fund his fake lifestyle, I explained, keeping my voice cold and steady. He secretly drained the equity out of their retirement asset. Now you might be asking yourselves if my parents authorized this. Did my father willingly risk the roof over his head so his son-in-law could pretend to be a millionaire on the internet? I pulled out a zoomed-in copy of the signature page and held it next to a public voting record containing my father's actual signature. I want everyone to look at the signature on this loan agreement. The loop on the letter D is completely wrong. The slant is entirely off. My father did not sign this document. Trey forged his signature to steal $400,000. This is not just bad business. This is federal wire fraud. This is identity theft. And the bank is currently preparing to foreclose on my parents' home because Trey has not made a single payment in 6 months. The chat section of my live stream erupted into absolute pandemonium. The same people who had been calling me a bitter, jealous spinster 10 minutes ago were now typing in all caps, expressing sheer horror and disgust. Aunt Vivian left a comment that simply read, "Lord have mercy on us all." People were tagging the local police department. They were tagging the FBI. The digital mob had completely turned and they were out for blood. But the most incredible part of this entire evening was not happening on my live stream. It was happening on my sister's. Before I started my broadcast, Sierra had gone live on her own Instagram account to host a watch party. She wanted her followers to see my supposed public apology in real time. She had propped her phone up in her living room, capturing the entire family gathered around their television. I reached over to my desk, picked up my iPad, and opened Sierra's live feed. I mirrored the iPad screen to my broadcast so my 30,000 viewers could see exactly what I was seeing. Sierra was so focused on the destruction of my reputation that she had completely forgotten to mute her own microphone. The audio from their living room was feeding directly into my broadcast, crisp and clear. The scene unfolding in their rented townhouse was a portrait of pure, unadulterated chaos. The illusion had shattered, and the shrapnel was tearing them all apart. My mother was standing in the center of the living room, clutching her chest, her face pale with absolute terror. The house, Brenda shrieked, her voice cracking into a hysterical sob. He took the house. Derek. He took our house. My father Derek was no longer the composed, arrogant patriarch who had demanded I wire $50,000 to save his golden child. His face was purple with rage. He lunged across the coffee table, grabbing Trey by the collar of his expensive blazer. "You forged my name," my father roared, shaking Trey violently. "I let you into my home. I treated you like a son. You stole my retirement. I will kill you. I will send you to prison for the rest of your life." Trey was practically crying desperately, trying to pry my father's hands off his neck. "Derek, please wait," Trey begged, his voice high-pitched and panicked. "It was just a bridge loan. I was going to pay it back. The crypto market just dipped. I can fix this. You cannot fix $400,000 of fraud," my father screamed, throwing Trey backward into an expensive accent chair. Sierra was standing near the television, staring at the screen in absolute shock. The realization that her entire life was a lie, that her husband was a criminal, and that she had publicly broadcasted their financial ruin to the entire world finally hit her. She turned her phone camera toward herself, completely forgetting she was still broadcasting to thousands of people. Her perfectly applied makeup was running down her face. Trey, she screamed, her voice a piercing shriek of pure rage. You told me we were rich. You told me you bought this stuff. You ruined my life. You made me look like a fool on the internet. She threw a heavy crystal decorative bowl across the room. It smashed into the wall inches from Trey's head, shattering into 100 pieces. Aunt Vivian and the other church members, who had come to celebrate my downfall, were now scrambling toward the front door, desperate to escape the exploding family dynamic. They were whispering furiously to each other, their faces twisted in shock and judgment. The same people who had condemned me for not supporting my brother-in-law were now witnessing his criminal exposure firsthand. I sat quietly in my beautiful Caribbean villa, watching the split screen on my computer. On one side, there was the calm, sun-drenched ocean view behind me. On the other side, the dark, violent implosion of the people who had tried to destroy me. It was poetic justice delivered in high definition. I did not need to raise my voice. I did not need to hurl insults or beg for their validation ever again. I simply provided the facts and allowed their own toxic greed to do the rest of the heavy lifting. The comments on Sierra's live feed were moving at light speed. Her own followers were ruthlessly mocking her, calling out her fake luxury lifestyle and demanding she apologize to me. Someone in her chat pointed out that the police were probably already on their way. That comment sent Trey over the edge. He scrambled up from the chair, pushing past my father and ignoring Sierra's screams. He sprinted toward the front door of the townhouse, abandoning his wife, abandoning his in-laws, and abandoning the fake empire he had spent years building. The camera caught the front door slamming shut behind him. My father immediately pulled out his cell phone, his hands shaking with rage, and dialed 911. He shouted his address into the receiver, demanding immediate police presence. Sierra collapsed onto the living room floor, sobbing uncontrollably into her hands, completely stripped of her arrogance and her fake designer aesthetic. The golden child had finally flown too close to the sun, and her wings had melted entirely. The massive audience watched every second of their spectacular collapse. The comments on the split screen were moving so rapidly that the text was just a continuous blur of white against the dark background. The internet had witnessed the ultimate exposure. I watched my father violently screaming into his phone for the police and Sierra wailing hysterically on the floor of her rented living room. I did not need to see anything else. I leaned forward, looking directly into the camera lens one last time. Thank you all for joining me tonight, I said, my voice projecting calm authority. I believe the truth has been sufficiently established. Have a wonderful evening. I clicked the button to end the broadcast. The screen faded to black. I closed my laptop, the sharp click echoing in the quiet luxury of my Caribbean villa. The broadcast was over, but the internet was just getting started. Within minutes, screen recordings of the live stream were trending across every major social media platform. My sister's carefully curated influencer career was incinerated overnight. Brands she had partnered with began issuing immediate public statements, severing their contracts and dropping her from their upcoming campaigns. Her follower count plummeted by the thousands. The digital kingdom she had built on a foundation of lies and borrowed money had completely collapsed, leaving her with absolutely nothing but a shattered reputation. But social media ruin was nothing compared to the legal avalanche that was about to crush Trey. Mr. Sterling and Mr. Vance, the wealthy VIP investors he had tried to scam out of $2 million, were not the type of men who scrolled through Instagram drama. However, their high-priced corporate legal team actively monitored the internet for anything related to their firm's business dealings. By the very next morning, the legal department for the investment firm had downloaded the entire broadcast, including the clear, high-definition images of the forged secondary mortgage documents I had displayed on screen. Because Trey had utilized electronic communications email and interstate banking systems to present false financial portfolios to investors across state lines, his actions instantly escalated from a local civil dispute to a massive federal crime. The investors did not just file a standard police report. They filed formal federal fraud charges with the authorities, ensuring that the full weight of the government would come crashing down on his head. Trey did not get far. After sprinting out of the townhouse, abandoning his screaming wife and furious in-laws, he had frantically tried to drain whatever small amounts of cash were left in his various overdrawn checking accounts. But my father, fueled by a mixture of pure rage and the desperate need to save his own retirement, had beaten him to the punch. Derek had already filed his own police report for the forged signatures on the home equity loans. By sunrise the next day, the flashing red and blue lights of law enforcement vehicles illuminated the perfectly manicured lawns of my parents' affluent suburban neighborhood. Two local police cruisers and a dark, unmarked federal vehicle pulled aggressively into the wide driveway of the house Trey had used as his personal piggy bank. Since Trey had officially listed my parents' address as his primary corporate headquarters on his fraudulent LLC filings to make his fake enterprise look legitimate, the authorities went straight to their front door. My father had to stand on his own porch in his bathrobe, utterly humiliated in the crisp morning air, while investigators flashed their badges and walked into his home. The wealthy, judgmental neighbors my parents had spent years trying to impress were all standing in their yards or peering through their windows, watching the spectacle unfold. Detectives tore through the house, demanding financial records and confiscating laptops. They eventually tracked Trey down a few hours later. He was hiding in a cheap rundown motel near the airport, attempting to buy a Greyhound bus ticket with a prepaid, untraceable debit card. He was arrested on the spot, shoved against the hood of a police cruiser, handcuffed, and hauled into federal custody. He was facing multiple felony counts of wire fraud, identity theft, grand larceny, and corporate embezzlement. There would be no bail. There would be no smooth talking his way out. The fake crypto visionary was going straight to federal prison. The swift, brutal hand of justice was only the beginning of the nightmare for my family. The bank, alerted by the sudden legal chaos, the public live stream, and the completely missed mortgage payments, officially initiated aggressive foreclosure proceedings on my parents' home. A massive, brightly colored legal foreclosure notice was securely taped to their heavy wooden front door for the entire neighborhood to see. The pristine social standing my mother had spent her entire adult life cultivating was reduced to absolute ashes. Aunt Vivian and the tight-knit church congregation, the very people who had been so eager to condemn me and praise Trey just days earlier, immediately turned their self-righteous judgment onto my parents. In their community, maintaining appearances was everything, and my parents were now the ultimate embarrassment. Sister Beatrice convened an emergency meeting of the church usher board and the choir directors. They effectively excommunicated my mother from her leadership roles and quietly stripped my father of his deacon title. My parents became absolute pariahs overnight. They were whispered about in the aisles of the local grocery store and blatantly shunned if they dared to show their faces at Sunday service. The community that had enabled and celebrated their toxic, superficial behavior suddenly wanted absolutely nothing to do with them. Meanwhile, Sierra was formally evicted from her townhouse for non-payment of rent. She was forced to pack her counterfeit designer clothes into black garbage bags and move into the cramped spare bedroom of a friend who barely tolerated her. They were all completely isolated. A week passed. I was sitting comfortably on the expansive wooden terrace of my St. Bart's villa. The late afternoon sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the Caribbean sky in brilliant sweeping shades of orange, pink, and deep purple. The air was incredibly warm, and the sound of the ocean waves crashing against the shore was a constant soothing rhythm. I had a glass of chilled white wine in my hand. My phone buzzed quietly on the glass patio table. I had temporarily unblocked my parents' phone numbers strictly for practical communication regarding the ongoing legal proceedings with Elias, my corporate attorney. I picked up the device and looked at the screen. It was a massive block of text from my mother, Brenda. I swiped the screen and opened the message. Even in the face of absolute financial and social ruin, she still could not bring herself to take genuine accountability for her actions. The text read, "Chloe, please. We are completely desperate. The bank is going to take the house next week. They are threatening to seize our retirement accounts. Trey completely deceived us. He is an absolute monster who manipulated this entire family. We had no idea what he was doing behind our backs. You know I would never intentionally hurt you. You are my flesh and blood, my firstborn daughter. Sierra is an absolute wreck. Her husband is sitting in a jail cell and your father is having severe chest pains from the constant stress. We need a loan. Just enough to pay off the bank and keep a roof over our heads. I know you have the money from your business. Please find it in your heart to forgive us. We need you." I sat there and read the frantic paragraph twice. There was no genuine apology for the lifetime of emotional abuse. There was no acknowledgement of how cruelly they had treated me on Thanksgiving night, practically throwing me out of a restaurant because I did not fit their aesthetic. There was no apology for how they had eagerly cheered on Trey's fraudulent $2 million lawsuit against my public relations firm, hoping to see me destroyed. She was only reaching out because the golden child had completely failed. The fake millionaire was locked behind bars, and the discarded scapegoat was the only person left on earth with a checkbook capable of saving them. She wanted to use the success she had spent years mocking to shield herself from the devastating consequences of her own terrible choices. I did not feel a single ounce of anger. I did not feel sadness or guilt or even pity. I felt an overwhelming, profound sense of absolute closure. The desperate little girl inside me, who had spent decades twisting herself into knots begging for her mother's approval, was finally peacefully asleep. I tapped the small reply box at the bottom of the screen. I did not type out a long emotional explanation. I did not lecture her about responsibility, fairness, or the harsh reality of consequences. I simply typed 4 words that summarized 35 years of my life. Find another table. I hit the send arrow. I watched the little green text bubble appear on the screen, confirming that the message had been successfully delivered to her phone. Then I tapped on her contact profile at the top of the screen. I scrolled down to the very bottom of the options menu and tapped the button that read, "Block this caller." A confirmation prompt appeared. I clicked it without a single second of hesitation. I immediately repeated the exact same process for my father. I did it for Sierra. I permanently and irrevocably severed the digital ties, ensuring that not a single word text or voicemail from any of them would ever reach my phone again. I set the device back down on the glass table, picked up my wine, and turned my face toward the beautiful ocean sunset, breathing in the scent of total freedom. 6 months later, the dust from that explosive night had completely settled, leaving a vastly different landscape in its wake. The swift and brutal efficiency of the federal justice system had ensured that Trey did not get a second chance to spin a new web of lies. He pleaded guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and corporate embezzlement. The wealthy investors he tried to scam made an absolute example out of him, pushing the prosecution for the maximum possible penalty. Today, Trey is currently serving a 72-month sentence in a federal correctional institution. There are no leased Mercedes, no tailored blazers, and absolutely no high-yield crypto portfolios in federal prison. He traded his fake millionaire lifestyle for a standard-issue jumpsuit, forced to face the harsh reality of a life built entirely on theft and deception. Sierra's downfall was just as absolute, though hers played out in the very digital arena she once used to terrorize me. When Trey was formally indicted, all of their assets were frozen and subsequently seized to pay back the massive mountain of debt he had accumulated over the years. Sierra was immediately evicted from her luxury townhouse. With her reputation completely incinerated by the live stream, her carefully curated influencer career vanished overnight. Major brands publicly distanced themselves from her, terminating her sponsorships and demanding refunds for breach of morals clauses. Today, she lives in a cramped, poorly lit studio apartment on the outskirts of Atlanta. She still logs onto Instagram, but her audience of 50,000 has dwindled to a few hundred hate watchers. She spends her days desperately trying to sell detox teas and discount waist trainers on her live streams. She is constantly forced to delete comments from people asking about her husband's prison sentence or her fake Caribbean villa. The golden child was finally forced to enter the real world, and she was completely unequipped to survive it. My parents, Brenda and Derek, suffered the fate they feared more than anything else in the entire world: public humiliation. The bank successfully foreclosed on the sprawling suburban home they had prized so highly. With their retirement funds completely drained by Trey's secret secondary mortgages, they had absolutely no financial safety net left to fall back on. Destitute and thoroughly disgraced, they were forced to pack their remaining belongings into cardboard boxes and move into the tiny guest bedroom of my Aunt Vivian's house. The living arrangement was a daily suffocating punishment for my mother. Aunt Vivian never let her forget the scandal constantly reminding her of her failures. They were completely shunned by the church congregation they had dedicated their lives to impressing. They stopped attending Sunday services altogether, too deeply ashamed to show their faces or answer the inevitable whispering questions from their former friends. They lost their house, their community, and the false sense of superiority that had defined their entire existence. While they sat in their self-imposed exile, clinging to the bitter remnants of their pride, I was busy building a life they could never touch. It was Thanksgiving Day, exactly 1 year since they had banished me from their dinner table and told me to grab leftovers from the fridge. I was not sitting in a dark car feeling sorry for myself. I was standing on the expansive sun-drenched terrace of my privately owned villa in St. Bart's. I was hosting a massive, highly successful Thanksgiving gala. The property was buzzing with life, laughter, and genuine joy. My public relations firm had just closed a record-breaking quarter, and I had flown my entire executive team, my loyal friends, and my chosen family down to the island to celebrate our success. These were the people who celebrated my victories, supported my ambitions, and respected my personal boundaries. They were the people who had truly earned their seat at my table. A private chef was carving a beautifully roasted turkey at the center of a long, elegant dining table, set with crystal glasses and fresh tropical flowers. The air smelled of sea salt-rich spices and expensive wine. The sound of a live steel drum band drifted over the infinity pool, mixing with the cheerful conversations of people who actually loved me for who I was, not for what they could extract from my bank account. I walked over to the edge of the terrace, holding a glass of vintage champagne. I looked out over the crystal-clear turquoise water, watching the sun begin its slow descent toward the horizon. I thought about the frightened, desperate daughter I used to be, the woman who had paid $35,000 just to buy a scrap of affection from people who were fundamentally incapable of giving it. I realized that the ultimate revenge was not the live stream. It was not exposing Trey's fraud or watching my sister lose her followers. The true revenge, the sweetest and most permanent victory, was simply outgrowing them entirely. They were trapped in a miserable, toxic cycle of their own making, while I was completely free from the heavy weight of their expectations. I raised my champagne glass to the setting sun, taking a slow, satisfying sip of my freedom. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have ever had to walk away from a toxic family dynamic to protect your own peace and sanity, please let me know how you found your freedom in the comments below. Do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about resilience, boundaries, and taking back your power. Remember, you are never obligated to set yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. Find your own table, build your own beautiful life, and never look back.